Hi, today I'm going to be talking about installing Firefox using Flatpak. I'm going to cover how you install Flatpak, the different ways you can install Firefox using Flatpak. Once you've installed it, where things like the desktop file are installed, how you launch Firefox from a script or the command line. Also other things, where is the Mozilla directory, and also what are some of the advantages of using Flatpak over the Snap version. So first of all, the issue is that in the next upcoming Ubuntu release, when you install Firefox, it's going to install it from a snap. The problem with the snaps is they're really slow. They create this annoying Firefox temp directory in your downloads folder, and also they auto update, which is really annoying. So what I'm going to do is show you the advantages of using Flatpak to install Firefox. So if I come across to FlatHub, which is a site where they basically list Flatpaks that you can install, and we have a look down here, what you'll see importantly is the version number, I think is up to date, and also the publisher is Mozilla. So the important thing is we're getting this upstream from Mozilla and not someone else repackaging it. So what I'm going to do now is actually go through the steps to install Flatpak and some of the tips and tricks I've come across actually getting this to work. Also how you can actually get Firefox Flatpak version to run in a separate Linux network namespace with PulseAudio as well. So what I'll do now is come across to this document that I've written, and this will basically go through the steps we need to go through to get Firefox installed using Flatpak. So the first thing we need to do is actually install Flatpak on our system. So if we're on Ubuntu, it'd be sudo apt install Flatpak. Now the next step, I'll just put this down the line actually, is you need to add this command, flatpak remote add -- user if not exists flathub, and the path to this FlatHub repository. And what this will do is this will basically give you a repository of software that you can install. So once we've done those two steps, what we need to do is actually install the Flatpak version of Firefox. So there's a couple of ways you can actually install stuff with Flatpak. You can either install them by running flatpak install flathub org.mozilla.firefox. I think that what that does is that installs stuff into var_lib flatpak. What I prefer to do is use the -- user option, and what that does is that creates you have a .var hidden directory in your home directory where stuff is installed. And the reason that I find that more useful is because it's then easier to get to the configuration files inside of the Flatpak. To actually modify the configuration file for things like Firefox or OBS. So that's why I use the -- user option when I install Flatpak, so that it will install stuff in my home directory, making it easier to modify them rather than have to switch over to var_lib flatpak app and search for stuff there. So that's the first step. Flatpak install -- user flathub org.mozilla.firefox. Now once you've done that, it's going to take a little time to actually download the runtime. Now the other really important thing is, what you may be used to is when you're using Firefox, either the deb version or the snap version, you can actually run Firefox by typing Firefox in the command line and pressing return, and it will open up. And you can use this technique for opening Firefox from scripts and stuff. But as you can see here, the command, when I type this out, I have ZSH syntax highlighting. It's showing it red, so there is no Firefox binary. So if I actually search where is Firefox, it's actually showing, I think this is actually a residual configuration directory from an old deb version or something, but there's no actual Firefox binary that you can run. When you want to run the Firefox application from the command line, what you have to do is flatpak run org.mozilla.firefox, and that launches Firefox. And that's just one thing that comes up, is there's no actual binary that you run, as would be the case with the deb or the snap version. So once we've got Firefox installed, what I'm just going to do is actually come down to this point here. The next thing is the desktop file. The desktop file is a file that's used with your application launcher to open Firefox or open whatever program. And what you'll find is, I've got the path right here. I may have got the path wrong. Just check this. No, it is user share Flatpak. Yeah. Okay, so normally your desktop application files will either be in the root of the system, but also in your local share applications. You'll have .desktop files for a lot of the graphical applications you install, so that when you use a program like Rofi or any desktop launcher, it can actually use that desktop file to launch the application. So this is the standard location for applications that you've installed that install a desktop file, but the location of the desktop file on Flatpaks is a lot longer, as you can see from this bit of code here. It's local share Flatpak app, and then the name of the package. So let's just go through this here. I'll just switch back to the terminal. Local share Flatpak app, and you'll see in here I've got 3 applications installed: OBS Studio, RetroArch, and Firefox. So the path would be org.mozilla current active export share applications. So current active export share applications, and in there you'll see the org.mozilla.firefox.desktop file. So it's a completely different location than the rest of your desktop files, and it can be hard to track that down. And the reason why we want to actually track that down is because we want to examine how Firefox gets launched from a desktop file. So what I'm going to do is I copy that desktop file to the desktop. Oops. Okay, so I copy that file to the desktop and switch to the desktop now. Come down to the exec section. What you'll see here is we've got this section here. Normally for Debian packages, what you'll have is just the path to the binary. So user bin Firefox, for example. But in this Flatpak, what we have is this user bin Flatpak run branch stable architecture command Firefox file forwarding org.mozilla Firefox, and then this section here, this U, is whatever's passed as an argument, like a file or a tab to open. So that's one of the differences, is that it's got a completely different exec structure than you'd normally got in a desktop file. So as I said, there isn't an actual binary that you run. You have to run Flatpak's binaries using this Flatpak run command, and then the name of the organization, which is like org.mozilla.firefox. So that was just one thing I wanted to cover, is the actual location of the desktop file, and also the structure of it. So what happens is you can actually copy these desktop files to your local share applications directory, sort of a modify and modify the name that comes up. So like as I type Firefox here, you could change the actual name that comes up and the icon and stuff. And I think what happens is if you create a copy of this file and put it in your local share, you should still only get one entry for Firefox, I think, but I'm not totally sure on that. So the next issue is the Mozilla configuration directory. Normally when you install Firefox on Linux, what you'll get is a .mozilla directory in your home folder, and the location of the and that folder will basically contain all your settings for Firefox, all your extensions, all the settings that you've tweaked. And what you want to be able to do is actually figure out where the folder on the Flatpak is. So this is the location of the .mozilla directory on the Flatpak version. If I can just switch back to the terminal. Okay. So as you can see, normally what you would have is a .mozilla directory in your home folder. So the Flatpak version has a different location, which is var app org.mozilla.firefox.mozilla, and inside there you will see your extensions like Firefox. So if I come in there, what you'll see here is your profiles, and you can see here like it'll say .default, and that'll be your sort of default profile. This is useful because if you're transitioning from the app version or the snap version and you want to copy your settings across, this is where you should be able to copy your .mozilla directory, get it, pick up the changes, but I couldn't get it to work. I had to reset up Firefox manually. I couldn't just copy the Mozilla directory into this location and get it to pick up stuff. So that's just another thing, is maybe you can get that to work, but I had issues getting it to actually pick stuff up. So the next thing that we want to cover is actually setting Firefox as the default browser. So if I come into Firefox here and come across to the hamburger menu and down to settings, and what you'll see here is this button. It says Firefox is not your default browser, make default. And what happens is when you click that, nothing happens. This had me stumped for a while. So basically, normally what happens is you install a new browser. Say you install Chromium or something, and the first time you run it, it'll say, do you want to set this as your default browser? And you click a button, and it sets it as the default browser. So any links you open in another program, open in that browser. And what I found is just clicking this button didn't do anything, and Chromium had hijacked my default browser. All my links were opening in Chrome. And after a bit of searching around, I found out the way to fix this is to use xdg. So this was a answer I found on Stack Overflow. And what we do first of all is we run xdg-settings get default browser. And if I come across to the terminal, what you'll see is the output is org.mozilla.firefox.desktop. So what I figured out you have to do from the post is you run this command xdg-settings set default browser org.mozilla.firefox.desktop. And again, this is the desktop file I was talking about earlier. And that is another reason for actually figuring out, one, its location, and two, what the actual name is. So as I said, if I come back up here, the desktop file I was talking about, this file here, in local share Flatpak app org.mozilla.firefox. This org.mozilla.firefox is the name of the sort of the bundle. And at the end, you can see here the desktop file org.mozilla.firefox.desktop. So you would think that you'd actually sort of, put in set default browser Firefox, but what you actually have to do is you have to put in the name of the desktop file that's installed by Flatpak in that location. So once you run this xdg-settings, here we go, set default web browser org.mozilla.firefox.desktop. That's going to set the Flatpak version of Firefox to be your default browser, and you can check. Let's come across here. Yes, so if I run xdg settings check default web browser org.mozilla.firefox.desktop, it outputs yes. Confusing thing is, if I come back to Firefox, I come across to settings, it still says Firefox is not your default browser, make default. Let me just check opening Chromium, because what I was finding is, okay, it's not doing it, but it was actually showing, you know, make Chromium your default browser message, and I just want to check it wasn't doing that every time that it opened. So that's another thing. In your general settings for Firefox on the Flatpak version, you'll see this message saying Firefox is not your default browser, make default. You'll click the button. Normally what would happen is this would change into a little yellow happy face or something and say, you know, Firefox is your default browser. But clicking this button doesn't do anything. Hence we had to go down another route, which was using these XDG options here. So first of all, XDG settings, get default web browser. Then to change it, we say XDG settings, set default web browser, org.mozilla.firefox.desktop. And then we can validate that those settings have actually been applied and are working. And once we do that, we'll get yes in the terminal. So that's just another confusing thing with the Flatpak version of Firefox, is that it doesn't actually show that it's your default browser. And what I can do is, if I just switch back here and come across, this is an org file, and these are links to various websites. And so when I open one of these links, it should use XDG to open this link in my default web browser. So if I run that, you can see it's opening my GitHub page in the Flatpak version of Firefox. So this is set as the default web browser, and it will work with other applications opening the links correctly. So that was the getting everything sort of set up. So what I want to go through now is actually a more complicated setup. What I have is what's called a split route for my VPN. I use Linux network namespaces. What this allows me to do is have two outputs, two networks on my system, the regular output and stuff going over the VPN. And what I can do is, by default, everything's going to go out my normal output. I can run a command that will allow me to send any application, either a command line application or a graphical application, over the VPN connection. And I've shown you how to do this before with the regular Debian version of Firefox, the Deb version, the Snap version, also the Snap version of Chromium. And I wanted to do the same thing with Flatpak. So what I'm going to do now is come across and close Firefox here and switch across to the terminal. So what I'm going to do is actually start this VPN. Okay, so what this is doing is, this is creating a VPN connection, and it's doing that in a separate Linux network namespace that's called VPN. And if I go to ls, was it run net ns, what you'll see in this run net ns directory, you'll see this folder called VPN, and that gets created when I start this VPN up. And what I'm going to do now is come across here, and if I run Firefox here, what you'll see is I've got two desktop entries. I've got regular Firefox, and I've got this other version, Firefox VPN. So Firefox, that opens the regular Firefox, and that's the Flatpak version. And another thing I should mention is the speed at which this opens compared to the Snap version. The Snap version is unbelievably slow. Even on this machine with 16 gig of RAM, it takes a good few seconds to open, and typically what will happen is the window will kind of like open a bit and then sort of judder a bit and then resize. And I have an old Mac Air 2011 laptop, and on that the Snap version can take like 30 seconds to a minute to open when you first boot up. So again, this is the regular version of Firefox, and for instance, if I go to a website that's blocked, I know that's blocked, like rarvg.to, and this is just going to hang. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to connect, okay? Because that domain is blocked. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run Firefox VPN, and you see Firefox is launched exactly the same. And if I go to what's my IP, across here, you'll see that I have this IP that's not my IP address. Basically, this is in America. And if I now come across to rarvg.to, we see this now connects. Okay. Now, the other important thing I want to show you is that I've managed to get PulseAudio to work with this setup as well. So if I come to youtube.com, okay, and what I'll do is I'll just come across to let's just say, and actually I'll tell you what, go to this one. Bruno Kumare's chant. So I'll just, you can see the audio is working there. So this is running in a separate network namespace, and Flatpak is sandboxed. But I figured out a way how you can get the audio working even though you're in a separate network namespace. We just come across so you can see the audio is working there. So that's another thing I wanted to mention with the sort of Flatpak setup. So if I just come across, what I'm going to do now is actually go through some of this. So the Flatpak setup, the way it works with audio is it has a file that sort of communicates with PulseAudio. And what it has is a PulseAudio cookie whose location is var.app.mozilla.firefox org.mozilla.firefox config pulse cookie. So if I just come across to this location, I'll show you what I mean. Let me switch back to terminal. So I'll put the var app org.mozilla.firefox config pulse. What you'll see is this cookie here. So this is the PulseAudio cookie file. So This is a script that I've modified from one I did before, and basically what it does is, what we do is we create a desktop file that links to this script that then opens up Firefox in a separate network namespace and gets the audio working. So there's a couple of bits to this. First of all, we're sort of setting these variables like pulse server, pulse cookie in this script. And this pulse server, what we've got is this notation here, Unix : run user id-u user pulse native. And this is actually, first of all, this is some syntax that we need to work with PulseAudio, so we can send it the cookie. So first of all, we have to have this Unix sort of socket notation here, and then this run user id-u user. What this does is it gets the file path. So if I go to run, was it? No, run user, sorry, my bad. Run user. What you see here is 100125. And what these are is these are your user IDs on the system. So you can see you've got GDM, so that's the login manager, and then you've got my username here and 1000. So if I look in 1000, what you'll see here is we've got these files here, and you'll see Pulse. So we've got Pulse, then we've got native PID, so I think it's native. Yeah, that's the full path. So that's the actual path of the PulseAudio server running under our user account. So what this bit of code does is it grabs the correct path to the PulseAudio server. And the important thing is we've got to have this Unix notation here. Then what we do is we set the PulseAudio cookie be equal to home user, and that's going to be your user account, .var app org.mozilla.firefox config pulse cookie. So that's the PulseAudio cookie. So we need to get the PulseAudio cookie and the location of the PulseAudio server. Now this next section here, BMF desktop file hint, that's pointing to the desktop file that launches Firefox. So when I run rofi and I type in Firefox, that's the file that it finds. So what we're doing is we're giving it a hint to where that desktop file is in this script. Now finally, this final command here is how we run Firefox in a script. So normally what you would do is, you're running a Deb application, you're going to have an actual binary for Firefox, which would be user bin Firefox. So in a script like this, what you'd basically do is write out the path to where Firefox is, which you'd find by you running something like where is Firefox or which Firefox. But as I said, Flatpaks don't have a sort of binary in the same way that you're used to. You have to run this user bin Flatpak run branch stable arch command equals Firefox org.mozilla.firefox. So the whole thing's not as easy to remember, and this command is what I got from the desktop file that I've been talking about, and the reason why that desktop file is really important to use with Flatpak, because it shows you how it's launched, and you need to get the name so that you can set the Flatpak version of Firefox as your desktop browser, your default browser. So this is the code that I got from that desktop file, so that we can actually launch Firefox from a script. So that's the actual script where we get the PulseAudio server, we get the Pulse cookie from the Flatpak org.mozilla Firefox container, we pass in the BMF desktop hint, which is the desktop file, and we run Flatpak. We run the Flatpak run command and launch that org.mozilla.firefox sort of container. So what I'm going to do now is go into the actual desktop file down here. And as you can see, what we've got here is this exe section. And what I've done is I've modified this. So as you can see, normally in the exe section here, what you'd have is this user bin flatpak run. Yeah, so that's where I pinched the command from, and I just removed the file forwarding section because I didn't need that from the script. So instead of this section here, what I've done is created a new desktop file, and what I'm doing is running doas, which is a sudo replacement, and I've got a script called namespace that basically puts the application I give it into that Linux network's namespace and sends all the traffic over the VPN. So I'm running this as root, and this namespace command, what it does is it first runs as root and then it drops down to your user account. So it doesn't run Firefox as root. It executes commands as root, but then runs Firefox as your regular user, which is important because you don't want to run graphical apps as root. So what we do is we replace this exec command here and we point it to the script. And if I just come through, you can see we have all these other sections for exec, like new window, new private window, and that sort of thing. So that's how I basically get Firefox to run in a separate Linux network namespace and get the audio working as well, which is obviously important if you want to watch videos. And what this allows you to do is run two things at once. So you can actually run some applications through your regular connection and some over the VPN, because normally what happens is when you start a VPN up, all your traffic's going to go over the VPN. And so what this allows you to do is maybe watch something from overseas in your browser, but also have all your regular traffic just go out your regular network interface. And as you'll see, if I just run YouTube here, it's going to come up, and as I showed you, everything worked, you know, all the audio worked. And if I close this and open Firefox, the regular version, and go to YouTube, what you'll see is I'll actually get the you agree prompt come up when you're in the EU. So in a sec, okay, yeah, before you continue to YouTube, I agree. And you don't get this when you're in the US. So that's just another way of showing you the difference between using YouTube in the EU as opposed to America. So that's how we can get Firefox to work over VPN as well. So let me just come across and quit this now. So the other thing I wanted to mention, if I just bring Firefox back up here, actually while I think of it, I'll just show you the location of that file. So local share applications, you'll see in local share applications I have this org.mozilla.firefox.desktop file, and that's the file I've just been showing you, where I'm running a script from the exec command that then launches the Flatpak. And so this Firefox_VPN, I just run bat on that. And so what you'll see first of all up here, the other thing I changed is you can see the name, there's Firefox-VPN. So when I run rofi and run Firefox, you see I've got two entries: the regular desktop file, which isn't stored in local share applications, and then this Firefox VPN, which is, and that's the modified version. So again, you've got the two locations for the desktop files. You've got the local share applications, which is the default one in your home directory, and you've got this more convoluted version for Flatpaks, which is local share Flatpak app, org.mozilla.firefox, current active export share applications, org.mozilla.firefox.desktop. So that's a lot more difficult to remember. So that's the difference between them. So if I just come across here and, as I say, what I'll do is I'll just launch Firefox. Another thing I wanted to mention is when you first go through the setup, it's going to prompt you to use a theme. Do you want to use a dark theme, that sort of thing? And one of the nice things I noticed is if I come across, click the extensions also respect the dark theme, which they don't in the Snap version, which is really nice. If I just come across, see, this is automatically respecting the dark theme. Let me see if this. Okay, I haven't set that up yet. But that's another thing I wanted to mention, is that the dark theme actually works with the extensions as well. So a couple of things with the Flatpak versus Deb version and the Snap version. So you're still going to be able to download the Deb version of Firefox from Firefox from the site, but in Ubuntu, the upcoming release, if you install Flatpak using sudo apt install Firefox, it's going to install the Snap version, and the Snap version is absolutely awful compared to the Flatpak version and the Deb version. It's incredibly slow to start. It auto updates, which is really irritating, because if you have several profiles set up, or you sort of launch Firefox different ways, it kind of gives you these error messages and you've got to delete a profile and restart it. So the auto update's really irritating. And the other thing that absolutely drove me bonkers was, by default, what it will do is it will create a folder called firefox.temp in your downloads directory. Because of the way it's sandbox, rather than going directly into your downloads directory, it creates this firefox.temp directory, and you can't get rid of it. Basically, you can delete it. Firefox will create it. You can delete it, start Firefox up again, and it will just create this Firefox temp file again. And one of the reasons it's really annoying is because suppose you've downloaded a couple of videos into your downloads folder and you want to play them, you run something like MPV, and you go to tab through to play one of the files. You ought to keep avoiding trying to play the Firefox temp folder. So that's another thing that's sort of really annoying about the Snap version, is that it creates this Firefox temp directory, and you just can't get rid of it, and it's just really annoying. Sometimes you try and open up an application by mistake. So that's a couple of the issues with the Snap version, which is going to be the default version coming up in Ubuntu, is that it auto updates, which causes issues, creates this firefox.temp directory, and it's incredibly slow to actually open, even on newer hardware. As I said, especially on older hardware, I've got like a 10-year-old Mac Air laptop, and on that, just booting up takes like 30 seconds to a minute to actually open, which is ridiculous. So the Flatpak version of Firefox is made by Mozilla. It's easy to install. It integrates perfectly with everything. But as I said, there are some issues you got, some things you kind of got to go through. As I said, setting it as your default browser isn't obvious. Clicking this actually doesn't do anything. So that's why we had to go through that setup, as I said, of setting it as your default browser using XDG. The other thing is the location of the desktop file is actually difficult to find. It's not in the usual location, which would be local share applications, or I think it's user share applications. So it's difficult to actually track down the org.mozilla.firefox.desktop file. And again, the reason why you actually need that is because you need to know the name of that, so you can set the browser as the default. And also the other thing is the actual location of the .mozilla directory. So the .mozilla directory, as I said, is where your settings and extensions are basically installed, and normally that would be installed in .mozilla in your home directory. So that's another advantage of using the Flatpak, is that it doesn't litter up your home directory with a .mozilla directory, but you will have a .var directory in your home directory for Flatpaks. And as I said, I prefer to use the -- user option when installing Flatpaks, because it just makes it easier to get into the Flatpak and find where things are, rather than having to search other parts of the system. So that's basically setting it as your default browser, and also how you can modify the desktop file so that you can use it with scripts and actually launch Firefox from the command line. Because as I said, there's no binary, so you've got to run this, use this Flatpak run command down here with the org.mozilla.firefox, which is the sort of the name. You can see var app. When you install a Flatpak application, it has this sort of naming structure like com.obs, project.studio, org.libretro.retroarch, org.mozilla.firefox. And see, these are sort of like the identifier for the container where everything's installed. Now, the other thing that I should mention is how do you actually update the Flatpak? You can, the way I usually just do it is Flatpak -- user update. I think that's what it is. I run. And basically that just will go through and check all the run times, and we'll update them if they need to be. I've already run that today, so I know that's all up to date. So that's the sort of lowdown on how you get the Flatpak version working with the Pulse server using the PulseAudio cookie. In the special naming syntax you've got to use when you're using this Pulse server variable, you have to use Pulse server equals Unix : and then the path to the Pulse native file. And as you can see here, we've got run user. My user ID would be 1000, so this bit of code would be replaced by 1000. And then it's Pulse native, and then the PulseAudio cookie for the Flatpak is in home your user account .var app org.mozilla.firefox config pulse cookie. And then we got the location of the desktop file again, and that's how we run a Flatpak GUI application from the command line, whereas normally we would directly specify the binary. We've got to use this special syntax which we got from this desktop file. So that's the reason why you really want to track down these desktop files for these GUI applications you install with Flatpak, because that will allow you to use things like XDG to set them as the default application for a particular kind of file, and also let you figure out how you can actually run those applications from a script. And so that's the script, and this is how you, again, create a desktop entry and modify it. You can modify the name, and you give it a different name from the original. So like mine was vpn.desktop, and then you can modify the exec line and point it to a script which will then sort of launch the Flatpak. So that will allow you to do cool things like launch it in a different network namespace. So that was some of the stuff I wanted to go through on the Flatpak version, and also I couldn't get it to pick up my sort of .mozilla directory if I copied it into where was the directory? So the config directory again is .var app org.mozilla.firefox.mozilla. So that's the directory where your extensions and Firefox settings are installed, and you should be able to copy across the previous .mozilla directory into here, but for some reason I couldn't get that to work. So that's another thing to bear in mind. There are some extensions you can sort of export from. So, for instance, uBlock Origin, if I come into here and go into Preferences, what you'll see down here is this section Backup to File. So there's two bits. There's sort of settings, and then there's like My Rules, and you can see you've got My Ruled Export to File. That's not what you want to use. You want to come to the settings, go Backup to File, and just save that. Okay, and then when you set up so basically what the steps I went through was on my previous version of Firefox, which was a snap version, I exported my uBlock Origin rules back up to file, and then when I set up the Flatpak version here, what I did was I installed uBlock Origin and then just did restore from file and selected that file, and that basically set up all the rules and my rules and filters and everything. So there are some things that you can export from. I also use Firefox multi-account containers, but you don't have an option with this add-on to export your settings. So I just mentioned this because if you do switch to the Flatpak version and you try and copy stuff across, and you find that you can't copy your extensions and stuff across, and you sort of have to go through and manually do it, there are some add-ons that will allow you to export the settings, and there are some that won't. uBlock Origin's probably the best example of why you want to do export your settings before you switch to the Flatpak version and get rid of the snap version. So if you've got the snap version of Firefox installed and you want to switch to the Flatpak version, so what I recently had was a snap version installed. I installed the Flatpak version, so then I needed to remove the snap version. You do that with like sudo snap remove Firefox. And if you wanted to, obviously that's to, if you really wanted to install the snap version, see how bad it is, you'd run, I think it's sudo snap install Firefox on Ubuntu 2004. But as I said, on Ubuntu, the next version of Ubuntu, I think Firefox, when you try and install it from using apt, it's going to install the snap version anyway. But this is how you would remove the snap version. Sudo snap remove Firefox. That's going to remove everything. And again, it's not too many steps to actually get this set up. So just a quick recap before I finish. First of all, we did sudo apt install Flatpak. Then we had to add the Flatpak and Flatpak remote, and basically that's the repository for all the software. So you run this command, and after you've done that, you ran Flatpak install Flatpak install -- user flathub org.mozilla.firefox, and said you don't have to use this -- user option, but then it kind of installs it in var lib Flatpak app, and it's just more difficult to get to. So I prefer to install stuff I think Flatpak's going to create this. I think it creates the. I'm not sure if you don't use this --user option, if it creates the .var directory in your home folder, but I just prefer to keep the settings in my home folder because it's easier to manage. So Flatpak install --user flathub org.mozilla.firefox. That's the other confusing thing about this, is when you install stuff, you have to use this sort of namespace for the container as opposed to the actual application's name. So you don't run flathub Firefox, you've got to run org.mozilla.firefox and Firefox Flathub. So if you come to flathub.org and you actually come down here to the bottom, you'll see command line instructions, and the way they set up a guide is basically how you install Flatpak. And they sort of recommend the Flatpak install Flathub way of doing it, but I prefer to use the --user option. And this is how you run the Flatpak from the command line: flatpak run org.mozilla.firefox. But as I said, it does create a desktop file that you can launch with your application launcher. But if you want to run it from the command line, this is what you need to do. So we did those two things, and again, the location of the desktop file is really long, convoluted, which I went through before. And then we had the location of the Mozilla directory is var app org.mozilla.firefox.mozilla. Finally, when we've gone through all that, we had to go through these options of getting the default browser, because what I found was after I uninstalled the Snap version, Chromium automatically became the default browser. And just clicking the set default browser, set as my default browser button in the Flatpak version of Firefox didn't work. So you've got to go through these steps: xdg-settings, get default browser. Then what you do is you run xdg-settings, set default-web-browser org.mozilla.firefox.desktop. So when you're setting the default web browser, you have to append .desktop to the that's what the name is going to be, and this is the name of the file in that long convoluted path. That's why you need to get the location of that file, so you can use xdg-settings to do that. And again, what you could do is you wanted to create a custom launcher and you wanted to set that as the default. You know, I've got one that's called org.mozilla.firefox_vpn.desktop. I could change that like that, and that would set the VPN version of Flatpak to be the default. So that's how you set the default browser, and also again down here how you launch Firefox Flatpak version in a script and get PulseAudio working with the PulseAudio server, the PulseAudio cookie, BMF desktop hints, and the Flatpak run command. Once you've done that, you can create your custom desktop launcher, and again give it a name that's different, so that when I run Firefox, I've got here's the currently open tab, got Firefox, and then I've got the VPN version, which is this. You just basically change the select function, point to your script, and you're probably going to want to put in the full path to the actual script. And we have this -u option at the end, and that's basically whatever's passed in, like whatever tab or file. So that's how you can create a custom launcher for Firefox Flatpak version. And then again, you would put that in. You put your custom version in local share applications. So org.mozilla.firefox.desktop. So that's how you can create custom launchers for the Flatpak version, and all the steps you need to go through, get everything working, and is much better than the Snap version, and also seems to be better than the Deb version. And you've got the advantages of it not auto-updating, not being as slow to open as a snap, you know, taking 10, 20, 30 seconds on older hardware. And you also seem to have better sort of integration where it's the add-ons also respect the theme that's chosen. So if I come down here, add-ons and themes, these are the enabled sort of themes, and you can sort of, you know, switch between them and see if that. No, it's still dark. That's the enabled one. Okay, so I think you got to go like disable, and then yeah, there you go, enable. So that's how you change sort of the themes, and his, you know, system theme. You can click on enable to enable that, or there's other sort of themes in there. But that's another nice thing, is that it seems like the add-ons respect the theme, so you don't have a dark theme and then a big white box here. So that's the lowdown on Firefox, the Flatpak version, how you set it as a default browser, location of the desktop files, the trick with PulseAudio and the PulseAudio server, how you can get it to run in a separate Linux network namespace, get PulseAudio to work, allowing you to work and watch videos in another region. So have a look at that. It's much better than the Snap version. If you've got that installed, you can uninstall that with sudo snap remove Firefox, and then just go through the steps of installing the Flatpak version. And if this is the first application you've installed with Flatpak, it's going to take a little while to download all the runtime dependencies. But once you've done that, it's going to be fine. It's not going to auto update on you, and it's just a much better one. You see how quick that is. If I've removed the Snap version, but literally the Snap version, even on this computer with 16 gig of RAM, sometimes it'd take a couple of seconds to come up, and then the window would sort of come up, you know, this size, and then suddenly resize to full screen. So that's Firefox Flatpak. I'll put these notes under the video so you can go through and easily get this installed, and perhaps try and copy your config across. But if not, for things like uBlock Origin, you can export the settings, but some add-ons won't let you do that. So have a look at the Flatpak version. It's a great improvement over the Snap version, and as I said, the in Ubuntu at least, the installing the Debian, the Deb package isn't going to be an option from the command line. You'd actually have to go and download it from the website, I think. So you can still install the Deb version if you want, but by default, the Snap version is going to be the way going forward on Ubuntu. So I'd advise you to use the Flatpak method instead. It comes directly from Mozilla, so it's not repackaged by someone. So it's going to be up to date as the Snap version. So it's really nice. All the graphics, the audio works. It's really snappy, and with a bit of tweaking, you can get it to be set as your default browser. But it's not obvious how to do that. So I had to do a bit of searching, and I found the answer on Stack Overflow using xdg-settings. So that's something that stumped you. Give that a go, and that should fix the issue and allow you to open links and stuff with the Flatpak version of Firefox as your default browser. That's all for now, and I'll put links to all this under the video.